So we'll do a review in Lekutei Sichas in Chelek Chov Gimel, volume 23, and this is the Sicha for Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tamuz. And in this Sicha, the Rebbe takes a expression that the Frierdiker Rebbe spoke about his incarceration, and the Frierdiker Rebbe expressed that had he not spoken on that Rosh Hashanah about the view of the Baal Shem Tov, that the divine providence is on every individual item, not only human beings, but also from everything that was created in the world, that Doimim Tzameach and Chai, he would not be able to tolerate the pain and go out of his imprisonment. So the Rebbe is going to discuss, first of all, what does this have to do with Hashgacha Pratis? And this has more to do with that everything is destined from Hashem. But this whole expression that the previous Rebbe said that he was in pain, he would not be able to tolerate the pain. And the Rebbe is asking, how could we say that? Why would the Rebbe not be sort of besimcha for the opportunity to serve Hashem with pain? And of course, the Rebbe brings down the difference between Rabbi Akiva and Avraham Avinu, that mainly Rabbi Akiva was looking for an opportunity for Mesiras Nefesh, but not Avraham Avinu, and the Rebbe was in pain because he couldn't do his shalichas. But why again, the Rebbe says, would he be in pain? Since this all comes from Hashem, explains in Tanya that everything is meant to be the way it is. Why would he be in pain? The Rebbe goes on in different steps and levels to explain the whole idea, and the end of the day, that the Rebbe was totally subjugated to the Eibishter, that it wasn't just that he needed to do his shalichas, he owned it, and therefore he would be in pain. And the Rebbe goes on that the Frierdiker Rebbe recognized his ability, that he needs to be there to do the work, on and on. It's a very, very interesting, detailed sikha that we learn about the total self-sacrifice from the Frierdiker Rebbe. It's interesting that in the note, in the Ha'oreh, the Rebbe brings down that this piece about Hashgacha Pratis, when you look in the published Maimer in Tofresh Pez, in the Maimorim of Tofresh Pez Ayin, we don't see that over there about, because the Rebbe is asking what's the relation to that, but yet the Rebbe brings down that that is quoted in Lekutei Deburim. So there's definitely that's the Inyan, as the Rebbe will go on to explain. So let's look inside. Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tamuz Aleph. The Shayches zu Meiser U'Geula Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tamuz for Rebbe and Shver, in relation to the connection to the imprisonment and redemption on the 12th and 13th of Tammuz of the Rebbe and my father-in-law. But the Ramolder erzählt, he once related, as in the Maimorim von dem Rosh Hashanah Fahren Meiser, that in the Maimorim Rosh Hashanah, that year that the Frierdiker Rebbe spoke on Rosh Hashanah of that year, which is Rosh Hashanah Tofresh Pez Ayin, so there was a discussion about the view of the Baal Shem Tov in the inyan von Hashgacha Pratis, in the concept of the individual supervision. as Ashgocha Protis, the discussion was there that the individual specific supervision is oich oiv daimem tzemeach chai. It also includes on the inanimate, the growing, and the living. And within the domains of the daimem tzemeach chai, unef jeden prat to prat, and on every detail and detail. So he said, Choch, so that was the discussion over there. Choch as der Inyan hot nit gehat kin shayches zum Maimer, although that aspect did not have any connection to the Maimer, and as I mentioned earlier, it was not printed with the Maimer. So the Rebbe still talked about it. So the Rebbe said that because he discussed that, it gave him the power to overcome his predicament and his situation. Had he not had that discussion in the Maimer on that Rosh Hashanah, he doesn't know would he be able to make it through. As the Rebbe translates, Soivel sein the Yisurim, to tolerate the pains, and to go out from incarceration. Generally speaking, the Baal Shem Tov is of the view, and we'll learn a little about more about it later on in the Sikha. The Baal Shem Tov's view is that even every individual detail of the domains of Daimim Tzemeach Chai is everything orchestrated, and everything is defined, everything is supervised by Hashem. The others that disagree with the Baal Shem Tov, they say that on the human being, there is a very detailed, specific supervision. But when it comes to the Daimim Tzemeach and Chai, the other aspects in the world, over there, there's just a general supervision on the type, all the daimim, all the different categories, but not each individual animal from amongst the animal, every individual bird, every specific thing in the daimim, in the tzemeach, each plant. There is doesn't apply hashgacha pratis there, but the Baal Shem Tov's view was that there is divine specific individual precisely for each and every detail in each and every of the daimim tzemeach chai medaber. And the Rebbe said that because that was a discussion that he had in the Maimer on Rosh Hashanah, that gave him the koyach, that gave him the ability to tolerate, to make it through all the pains of the incarceration. So what's the connection between the Baal Shem Tov's view in Hashgacha Pratis with the previous Rebbe being able to tolerate the pain of the incarceration? So we need to understand that what is the novelty of the view of the Baal Shem Tov as far as individual supervision, detailed supervision, is as we said before, as oich alle bruim, that also all creations, fun chai, whether it's the living, tzoymeach, whether it's the growing, the daimim and the inanimate, zainen mushgochim b'hashgocha pratis, they are supervised with a specific individual supervision from them Eibishter, from Hashem. Aber die hashgocha pratis oifun min hamedaber, but the divine providence on the speaking category, the people, the human being, is that is a matter which everybody agrees that there is specific divine providence for every individual living person, for every demina medaber. That is even without the novelty of the Baal Shem Tov's view. Ubefrat, this is all human beings. Ubefrat, and especially Benegeya Yisrael Am Kirove, as it relates to the Jewish people who are the nation that are close to Hashem. And within the Yidden, on Eden Shemrei Torah mitzvahs be prote protis, and when we talk about Yidden who keep Torah mitzvahs, and very specific, within the specific supervision of Yidden in general, is that Yidden Shemrei Torah mitzvahs has a more individualized supervision. When the meduber is, especially when we are discussing over here, is vegan manhige and the Yisrael. We're talking about leaders and princes of the Jewish people. Their matters, seinen neged zu Klal Yisrael, that's touches and that's important to Jewish people in general. Is the Chavad the Pashut, so for sure it's obvious, betachlis, totally obvious, as alle Zeyere Yonim Seinen Behashgacha Protis, that all matters that takes place with them is with the very specific individual supervision from Hashem. If the Rebbe, previous Rebbe, was trying to say that this was all supervised, he doesn't need the novelty of the Baal Shem Tov that there is supervision even on the other domains of Daimem, Tzemech, and Chai. It's sufficient medaber because we're talking about the Rebbe here, we're talking about the Geula, we're talking about Yud Beis Tamuz. Ein Farvosot and by Meiser for Rebbe. So why is it that when they incarcerated the Rebbe, Gedarft Onkum and Davke, that they needed to specifically come on to Shitas Abal Shem Tov in Ashgocha Protis, to the view of the Baal Shem Tov in Ashgocha Protis, that gave him the ability to persevere when this is not talking about, we're not talking about the Daimim Sameach Chai, we're talking about a Medaber, talking about a Nosi Yisrael. So what's the connection, Hashgocha Protis, from the view of the Baal Shem Tov to the issue at hand to the Rebbe. But besides that, why do we even need Hashgocha Protis in this case to help the Rebbe overcome that idea, to overcome, because he spoke about in the Maimer, to help him overcome, to tolerate the Yisurim, because it seems like this is not something which would be in paper. This is all coming from Hashem. The Tmiya is not Geresem. The surprise is even greater. What is Bechlal Negeyado? What is it over here? How does it connect? By Meiser from the Rebbe, we're talking about the Rebbe being incarcerated. The Hashgosha from Hashgocha Protis, the emphasis of the divine supervision. That divine supervision means we're saying that Hashem is supervising the incarceration, all the Yisurim, the pain that is going through. Why is that necessary to emphasize that thing for the Rebbe to tolerate the incarceration? This was totally had to do with fulfilling Torah mitzvahs, which is mitharbotzas ha-Torah v'achzokas ha-Yahadus, with spreading Torah and strengthening Yiddishkeit, umit oisfirun die Shlichus von dem Eibishten, and to fulfill the mission of Hashem. A Yid, the Rebbe had the mission of Hashem to spread Yiddishkeit and to spread Torah and strengthen Yiddishkeit. And that's what he did. That was his mission over there. Is doch pshita, so then it's obvious, this is not a matter of divine providence, but it's obvious as Alam Sashayich was anything, all that is connected to the mission of spreading Yiddishkeit, Koilel the Zachem was which includes those aspects that took place with the Rebbe, that happened to the Rebbe, the incarceration, etc. They're all tied with the will and the intent and the supervision of the blessed Hashem. Why does we need the idea of Ashgacha Pratis, which is a general concept that Hashem supervises everything? But this was more than just Hashem's supervising. This was directly the work that the Eibishter wants him to do, that the Eibishter wanted the Frierdiker Rebbe to do, that the Frierdiker Rebbe was involved with in strengthening Yiddishkeit, which is from the Hashem. So, of course, this is the will of Hashem. So why do we need to say that this is supervision when this was very clearly part of the mission of doing what Hashem wants? Well, perhaps you're going to say yes, but that gave the Rebbe the strength. Yes, of course he was doing it because the Eibishter told him and he was instructed that this needed to be done. But still, the Rebbe needed Maimer to say about the Ashgacha Pratis to help himself overcome some of the pains. Based, but Pashtus Yeshloimer, simply we can say, as those Gufa is der Pshat from the Rebbe's Werter, that this in itself is the meaning of the word of the Rebbe, durchtragen, which is to be able to tolerate Lisbel Hayisurim, Velotzis min Hamaiser, to tolerate the pain, to go out from incarceration, to get out and to go out from the incarceration. So what the Rebbe meant was like this: Hayois in Maimer hat sich geredt wegen Hashgacha Pratis. Since in the Maimer it was discussed about the specific supervision of the Rebbe, their field, so the Rebbe sensed as the Ali Yisurei HaMaiser Zainen Bashgacha Pratis. He saw that all the pains of the incarceration are specifically with Hashem's supervision. He's supervising everything that's going on with the Frierdiker Rebbe, from them, from Hashem, and that gave the Rebbe the koyach and the that gave him the ability that he should be able to make it through it, is because he appreciated and he realization of the fact that Hashem is supervising all this, that gave him the koyach. Of course, everything he was doing the work of Hashem, but how does he tolerate it? How does he sensing the Hashgacha Pratis that he was said in the Maimer gave him the koyach? But the Rebbe says this is not totally understood. So basically what we're saying now, the Frierdiker Rebbe would have an issue with all of this sorrows, with all of the pain, the Yisurim that he's going through. And he may not have been able to make it through, and he had to explain to himself, or he had to sense and appreciate the fact that everything is Hashgacha Pratis. But why? Why did he not use the standard reflection that a person in a situation which goes through sorrows to realize that everything that comes from Hashem is from the good, as the Alter Rebbe speaks in Tanya? And it doesn't say because of the Hashgacha Pratis. He used here a seemingly other kind of meditation to be able to make it through the incarceration. This is not totally smooth. Is masim, because according to this interpretation, it is fitting as the Hadgosha Zol Zayin, that the emphasis should be nit as zoi oifun inyan from Hashgacha Pratis, not so much that it is the specific supervision of Hashem, nor oif them inyan, but on another aspect, for ein ra yored milamayla, that nothing bad comes from above. There should be another kind of meditation and reflection, how to tolerate the pains that he faces. Similar to this idea, nothing bad comes from above. Unvis is mevuir in Tanya Beprotius, as explained in Tanya in detail. The eight to kennen übertragen Yisurim gives the advice how one is able to tolerate and carry through, make it through the pains. Bis zu kennen, mekabel sein berotzinu besimcha, and that in order to be able to accept even pains with willingly and with joy, ukeros chazal, as our sages of blessed memory instructed, kishem shemevorech ala teva chulu, that just like a person makes a blessing and makes a blessing to Hashem for the good, he makes also for the bad. The Gemara says, what does it mean, just like? And the Gemara says, what it means just like is likabu linhu b'simcha, to take it with joy. So how does one accept it with joy? The Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya is by reflecting that this ain't ra'yer and milmaylo. So why did the Rebbe need the level of Hashgacha Pratis to be able to accomplish this? Rebbe brings down the different expression, the different places, very interesting as it relates to Rebbe's emotion, Rebbe's feelings about the situation. And the Odyssey elaborates. Gimel. And the Rebbe says that's not the right approach. The Rebbe did not need the Hashgacha Pratis reflection to help him overcome the Yisurim. The Rebbe didn't even consider himself anything. His pain would not have any value to him at the point of, and he didn't look for reflections for that. That's why he didn't bring that down. It was something totally different, that the Rebbe was in pain, not the physical pain. The Rebbe was in pain that the work that he was doing was stopped and he wasn't able to. Let's look at something. Gimel. I want to point out that Tam Farvos the Rebbe nit der Mont dem Inyan. The reason why the Rebbe did not mention this idea als Mittel as a means to kennen durchtragen the Yisure HaMeiser, in order to be able to overcome the pains of the incarceration, is move on. It's understood. The Rebbe is called Kule Gewen reingetan und übergegeben zu dem Ebersten und zu Torah Mitzvah. The Rebbe was entirely, all of his being, was invested and devoted to Hashem and to Torah Mitzvahs. But to such an extent, in such a way, as an Egen Mitzvahs, that his existence had no bearing, no value. The melee is moving, and therefore it's understood as Zayne Yisurim Gashmiyim, that the Rebbe's physical pains, they could not have caused the situation for nit kennen ze ibetrog, not to be able to tolerate and overcome them because of his physical pain. Bald hot wegen sich nit getracht, since he didn't think about himself, but nit getracht, ados is ra yoynet, so he didn't think this is bad coming, and therefore it doesn't come down bad. It wasn't about him. So seems like there's something else. The Rebbe didn't bring. The Rebbe says that they didn't say about reflection that it's not bad or other things, is because he didn't see it as bad, because it wasn't about him. But the question is, was is the Rebbe matgish the Schwierigkeit? Why does the Rebbe therefore then emphasize the difficulties in Soivel Zayin, the Yisure HaMeiser, in tolerating the pains of the incarceration? Why is he emphasizing that it was the pain and he would not be able to tolerate it, when the Rebbe did not feel or consider anything to himself? It almost seems that not only should it not be a situation that he can't tolerate the pain, he should be happy with it, it would seem, because the pain that he's getting is because of his dedication and service to Hashem. Badra, on the contrary, about as their Meiser mit seinen Yisurim, since the incarceration together with the pains that came along with the incarceration. Seinen given Atoitzoe, von sein Avodas HaKodesh Narbotzes HaStoiro, they were a result of his holy work in spreading Torah and strengthening Yiddishkeit in the entire width of the country, in the whole country over there. Okay, you do the Parshas as known and publicized the story of what was going on in those days. This should have brought out by the Farkert. Opposite, Atnu Shel Simcha should have been a movement of joy, was a given that he merited through this service that he was strengthening Yiddishkeit in the entire country, that through that to the Madrege Mesiras Nefesh to the level of self-sacrifice. Bis zu Yisurei Upachat Moves, Azoifiltek, to the extent that he had pains of death, fears of death for so many days. He was threatened over there with his life. So he should have brought a level of joy to him that his great work in strengthening Yiddishkeit brought to him all of these Yisurim of us. This is Al Derech V'Mekifin by Rabbi Akiva, similar to what you find by Rabbi Akiva, as Vener Zeiche Gewen to Kiddush Hashem, when he merited to sanctify Hashem's name. So at that time, when he self-sacrificed, and he was very difficult torture, he still had the feeling of pleasure, of the delight, that he had finally reached to the thing, was called Yom HaYisim Mitztayir. All my days, he said, I was in pain. When am I going to have the opportunity to show my Hashem, my great love, that I'm ready to give up my life to him? So he said to his students, so now when I actually have the opportunity, he is filled with a feeling of delight, of pleasure. So why would the Rebbe not be able to tolerate it? Because he didn't consider himself, it wasn't about himself, it was totally for the Eibishter. Should have filled him with a level of joy. And the Rebbe brings out that the difference between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Avram in Avram Avinu and their Mesiras Nefesh is that Rabbi Akiva was actually looking for the great advantage of being able to be on Kiddush Hashem, but Abraham just did his work. He was only concerned with his work. If it had also needed to have Mesiras Nefesh, that was there. And the Rebbe says the Frierdiker Rebbe, in the similar way, wasn't looking for Mesiras Nefesh. He was looking to be mefarsim, to strengthen the Yiddishkeit, to keep the spark, the flame of going over there in that time. So he wasn't happy from his personal being able to suffer Yisurim for it. He was in pain because that mission is interrupted. And as the Rebbe will continue to explain, that even though this mission was interrupted from Hashem, he is still in pain because he has ownership to this. Let's see inside Dalet. So we can say, what's the explanation? Why did the Rebbe say that he could hardly tolerate the Yisurim? In seinem Maimorim, in his Maimorim, read the Rebbe Arum dem Chiluk. The Rebbe discusses the difference zwischen der Mesiras Nefesh von Rabbi Akiva, the self-sacrifice of Rabbi Akiva, and the Mesiras Nefesh from Avram Avinu, and the self-sacrifice of Avram Avinu. Rabbi Akiva had gesagt, Rabbi Akiva said, Kol Yom HaYitzli Mitztayir. All my days I was in pain. When will I have the opportunity? When will it come to my hands and I will devote myself, show Hashem my devotion by totally self-sacrifice? He was searching and he was yearning to Mesiras Nefesh Misad Atzma. Mesiras Nefesh on its own, to merit Mesiras Nefesh. Not to have Mesiras Nefesh doing another thing, but the value and the special greatness of Mesiras Nefesh. Mitzad der größer Teierkeit for Mesiras Nefesh, because of the great preciousness of Mesiras Nefesh. Hayois, as durch dem kommt man zu der größten Madrege. That way you reach the highest level von Verbundenkeit und Vereinigung, from being tied and being united with Hashem. That was Rabbi Akiva. Avraham Avinu, on the other hand, hat nicht gesucht kein Mesiras Nefesh. He did not search for self-sacrifice als Tachlis u'matore far sich, as a goal and a purpose just for itself to do Mesiras Nefesh. Sein Inyan is given to mefarsim sein elokus be'olam. His aspect, what he did was publicize godliness in the world. Vayikra shom b'shem havaye keloilam. The pasuk says he proclaimed there in the name of Hashem, Kel Oilam, and as interpreted, he didn't say Kel Oilam. Not first of all, Vayikra. It's not that he called. Don't say this was what he did by himself, but actually he made others call. Al Tikra Vayikra Ela Vayakri. Don't pronounce it that he called, but he made others call. Is given in ganzen Arangiton. Avram was totally invested in that avodah, in the service to mefarsim sein elokus, to publicize godliness. Und oibes is given verbunden mit Mesiras Nefesh. If it was tied to self-sacrifice, hat es nit menea given klal. This didn't stop him at all. He self-sacrificed. He wasn't doing Mesiras Nefesh. He was doing publicizing godliness. If in order to do that required Mesiras Nefesh, he did that too. He was ready for that. And the Riber hat Rabbi Akiva gehat, and that explains why Rabbi Akiva oineg from the Inuya HaMesiras Nefesh. He had the delight, Rabbi Akiva, from the pains of the Mesiras Nefesh, the torture that he went through for the Mesiras Nefesh, weil es hat sich ausgeführt sein Mevukesh, because he accomplished that which he seeked for, to be sacrificing for Hashem, to moiser nefesh sein sich of elokus, to give up his life, to give his soul up for godliness. But by Avram Avinu, by Avram, our father is given, Anders was different. B'shas meotim verspart in Beis HaSurim, when they incarcerated him in the prison, as the Gemara relates that when he broke the idols over there, he was in pain. Because while he was in incarceration, he was not able to do his work of publicizing godliness in the world. Hey, and the same thing, al derech zeh, similar to this, is given oich by the Rebbe, the Baal HaGeula, also by the Rebbe, the ones whose redemptions of Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tamuz. Mitzad shleimas v'toivas atzmai, from the perspective of his personal growth, wholesomeness, and his own benefit, is that matzav hanal, so that above situation of being imprisoned, tzukumen to tachlis hashleimus in avoda for Mesiras Nefesh, to be able to come to the ultimate wholesomeness, to the greatest level of wholesomeness in the service of Mesiras Nefesh, Bishu Yisure Haguf Kipshute, to the extent of physical pain, literally, Goyrem Asimcha Gedoylo, this brings about a tremendous joy. So, from the perspective, from his personal perspective, that was actually very joyful for him. But the incarceration, however, what he was in pain was that he could not spread Yiddishkeit. Since the Rebbe's avoida was not, is nit given to live Milus Amisidas Nefesh Mitzad Atzma, it was not because of the advantage of Mesiras Nefesh on its own, nor bichdei durchzuführen sein Shlichus ba'al mohodein, but rather it was in order to be able to carry through his mission in this world, which was to mefit sein Torah, mitzvahs, and pnimis ha-Torah v'chulu, to spread Torah, mitzvahs, and the inner parts of Torah, etc. Und zu dem ist given übergegeben beäufen, and he was devoted to this in such a way as kein zachat im davon nit abgehalten. Nothing could stop him from this. Afilu, he devoted to his work, that was his mission. Afilu and the dabei hat sich gefordert Mesiras Nefesh, even if it needed self-sacrifice. So jeder Zeit und auf jeden Tritt b'avodose, which is at all the time, and on every step in his work, you needed constantly self-sacrifice. You were always in danger. We saw this vividly during the day of his leadership. And specifically in that country before the incarceration. Is verstandig, so we understand why he had a lot of pain while he was incarcerated. Personally, he himself was even greater, became greater. But the Rebbe was in pain because he couldn't do his shlichus. But this caused, notwithstanding that personally he grew to the highest level, but it caused him pain and Yisurim Val Hamaiser Yisura Hamaiser when because this incarceration and the pains of the incarceration prevented him from durchführen sein Shlichus, to accomplish his mission to Mekarev sein Eden Hashem L'Tarose, to bring people close to Hashem. So basically, from a personal level, this may be not a problem, and on the contrary, this brings him to the highest level of Mesiras Nefesh. But the Rebbe was not devoted to. The Rebbe was devoted to his shlichus. He wanted to bring hidden. His life's mission is to bring people to Yiddishkeit. So the fact that they incarcerated him, that was very upsetting, and there was a lot of pain for that because he can't do his mission. Well, the Rebbe explains, so we're going to say, but who's not letting him do the mission? He is in the mission of doing it for Hashem. But if the Eibishter sends him in prison or makes it orchestrated such a thing, so everything is from Hashem, why does he have to have pain for not being able to spread Yiddishkeit when Hashem is the one that doesn't allow him to spread Yiddishkeit? The Rebbe explains there's two kinds of devotion to Hashem. The one is devotion to Hashem. I do what I can, and after I've done what I can, okay, like the story of the Rebbe Rashab, that he was crying after not being able to accomplish over there, and they asked him, but we did what we can, why are you crying? He says, but we haven't accomplished. So there's two approaches. There's one approach where I feel like I have to do my shlichus, and if I couldn't do it, I'm done. And the other thing is that you take ownership. So if you can't do it, you're still devastated by it. Let's look inside. Well, but you still need to understand. Also, this great service, that he served in spreading Torah and strengthening Yiddishkeit, but the Rebbe Giton nit lois mal das is sein Shlichus. He didn't just do it because that was his mission, nor as it is no maldos is the Kavan El Yoina. That's what Hashem wants him to do. Is about as der Meister is doch Chas V'Sholem mit given zu lieb sein Shul, since the incarceration, God forbid, was not of his fault, was not the fault of the Rebbe. Not in Ganzen, not so. This came totally as a result from Afotzas Hayadus Bishlemus, from completely spreading Yiddishkeit, B'toich Mesidas Nefesh B'tachlis, and having completely self-sacrifice. Is doch Muvam B'pashtu. So then it's very understood very simply as a Zoyis given the Ratzon that this is what Hashem wants. As the Rebbe soll damals sein in Meise, that he should be incarcerated then. Und durchgehen alle Yisudei HaMeise Rachmon Litzlan. He should have to go through all the pain of the incarceration, God forbid. In Cain is Hodra Kushel Duchta, so our question comes back to its place. Was for an Ort hat Lifizeh sein Betzar davon? What room is there? What space is there to be in pain because of that? That's Hashem's doing. So the Rebbe explained that Friedrich Rebbe wasn't upset about his physical pains. He was upset, and the tsar was that he was not able to spread Yiddishkeit. But this wasn't just a shalichas, this was the will of Hashem. So he was not at fault being imprisoned. The contrary, he did the utmost what he was supposed to, and they imprisoned. That means that that's what Hashem wants. So why is he in pain? Is the the explanation of this is in the Avodas Hanishama, so durchführen the Shlichas from the Meibersten, in the service of the soul to accomplish the mission from Hashem. Sein Faram Tzvei Efarim, there are two ways. Valderech Dugma Vidos is Ba'odom Hatachta. We can take a sample how it is by the person below Binyonim Tachtonim when we deal about lower matters. As sein Ton an Arbeit can sein of Tzvei Efarim. One can do the work on two ways. Ein Eufen is as tut als an Angestellter. One way is that you do the work as a hired person, as an employee. So your way you work as an employee. This we can see it in the world by us in the Tachten. And he's talking ganzen übergegeben zu tun die Sache be'emuna. He's actually totally devoted to do the item faithfully. He can even do it not to get reward. Just he's totally devoted just to do the job. But still, if he's an employee, he's an angestellt ba'atzveit. You are hired by another person. Das ist nicht sein Sache. It doesn't become you're an employee. Nicht sein Geschäft. It's not your business. Anders ist aber, wenn der Arbeit wird getan durch den Balabayis allein. But it's different when the work is done by the owner by himself. The owner does the work is not the same. The employer. Das is im Negeya. That is something which is important to him. See, sein Sache, it's his ownership. He has ownership. It's his business. Sein eigener Geschäft is his own business. And the Rebbe says, when could you say the difference between the employee and the employer is not during the time of work? What happens after the work? Over there you see, do you live and breathe? The employee, after he finished the job, he's done. He's not worried about it. But the employer is continuously worried about the success of the business. He owns the business. Der Unterschied zwischen dem Bal Habayis und dem Angestellten Be'amunah, the difference between the owner of the business and the one who is hired, even though he's a faithful, trusted worker is nitoifach zeifel boilet. It is not so much telling in unbishas the arbet gufa when at the time the time of the work itself. Beide tun the arbet, they both do the work with fuller ibegigkeit, with the full devotion und hasmod and diligent. They're both when they're working. The chiluk ver iker, when can you mainly tell the difference between who is the employee and who's the employer? Better that takes place later. Begemar ha'avodah, at the end of the work, or their balaylo, or at nighttime. Between one day of work and the other day of work. In dem Zman, then the Arbeit wird nicht getan, during the time when the work is not being done, not during the work hours. Und der Eisek wird nicht geführt, the business is not being run now. Schläft der Angestellte ruhig, the employee, the hired person sleeps very peacefully. Had getan be'amuna, he did with faithfulness, als was had gekannt, everything that he can do. The arbeit aber Eisek is nicht in the boy. Problem is, but the work isn't, the business isn't going properly. Filter aber as nit darf, so he feels that the employee feels it's not that he should, uniter can, and not that he's able to help it. So there's nothing he can do about it. He can't help it about that. He has a very calm conscience. There's no Mashenken the Balabais, as opposed to the owner. He cannot sleep in such a condition, such situation. He cannot be relaxed, for as long as the thing that Asek is nitki the boy, the business is not the way it should be. He's the owner. That's the difference between the employer and the employee. Zayin. Al derech zeh, seine Franz zwei Madreges in Neshamas. There's two levels, steps in the Neshamas. There's employee Neshamas and there's employer Neshamas. Zwei Madreges Neshamas. Und zwei Fanim, and there's two ways in Oisfirin de Kavone from the Eberstein how to accomplish the intent of Hashem in their Shlichus Ba'al Mahodein in their work in this world. Is one type, style of work is, as there is in ganzen Iber gegeben, auszuführen sein Shlichus, he's totally devoted to accomplish his mission. Nicht zu lieb Shleimus v'tevas atzmai, not for his own wholesomeness and his own benefit. No, he's a devoted worker. He's totally devoted to it. Nor blois to the bekavona to leave their kavona elyon. He's only doing it for the supreme, for Hashem's intent. Unertudos bismesiras nefesh v'ad b'chlal. He did this up till the level of self-sacrifice, and he actually sacrificed. But one he has done everything that he's able to. And he has no possibility to do more than that. Is the shaychers of Hoben Tzar der Fun? It's not applied that he should be in pain of this. There's nothing he can do about it. We know that a person who is against his will, the Torah, the Eberster exempts him from his service. He did what he could, so he's exempt now. And especially when he knows, as Altis Bashgocha Elyoina, that everything is by the supreme supervision, is the Chagufa Oizgestaltun Obgemosten. So this itself has been set up and it's measured in the Rashgocha Elyoina by the supreme supervision. Nit nor wie groß sein efshorizol sein zu tun der Arbeit. Not only has it been determined how much he has the possibility to do this service, but also how much needs to be accomplished. Not all people that how much should be accomplished. So from both areas, what he needs to do, what needs to be done, it's all by divine providence. So the Eibishter runs it. is b'meilen itok in tam v'sibev tzar, so there's no reason, there's no cause for pain. That's the employee mentality. That's the nefesh. That's the neshama of that category. Of Shas Ober Aid. But there is the higher level of connection. Shas Ober Aid. He is so tied and he's so united with Hashem. As the Rotze v'kavones hapoire, wird sein Rotze v'kavone, that what the will and the intent of the Creator becomes His will, and He becomes an ownership of that. What Hashem wants, He wants too. It's not that He wants to do what Hashem wants, but that becomes His wishes, that becomes His intent. That way He becomes an owner. That muss sein avoda, nit nur beoifen. It's not just in a way as a fir durch sein Schlichus von Ebersten that He accomplishes and He carries through the mission of Hashem. Nor by Him hört sich on, but He senses as the avoda is sein der eigener Inyan, that this avoda is His own matter, und noch mehr sein ganze Metzies, and that is His entire existence. Und der Riber, and therefore, a viele wenn hat getan, als was es ist bechedes zu tun. Even when He done everything that He's able to do. Bald aber der Inyan hat sich nicht abgetan, since this matter has not been accomplished, oder nicht geworden abgetan beschleimes, or it has not been accomplished fully, is als balabais hoter tsar. So then he, as the owner, he owns the business. Hoter tsar is in pain. He has tremendous pain because he owns it, and this is what Hashem wants. This is what He wants. And even if I did everything, but he's in pain because it can't be accomplished now. And the Rebbe brings the story of the Rebbe Rashab. As the story that happened from the Asifus HaRabbonim. There was a meeting of the rabbis in Petersburg. The site from Chag Admur Barashab Nishmosei. The time of the Rebbe Rashab Nishmosei, the father for the Bal HaGeula, the father of the ones whose redemption Yubes Gimel Tamuz. The Asifus Anigeven, it's Hamanheim, the meeting. The meetings were in connection to the fact was the Melucha Dan Gefoder, the Melucha was demanding as the Rabbonim Malamdim that the rabbis and the teachers so most building they should have to have a certain level of education in the secular studies, in the general studies. To move on, self-understood as alle Gedolei Yisrael haben sich damals stark gegengestellt der Gesellschaft. All the great leaders of Israel, the Jewish people, they stood up very strongly against this decree. The Soreh HaMelucha Ba'aber Gevor, the officers of the government, they warned, as if you're not going to give in, and accept this decree, that men machen chas v'sholom pogromen of Yidden, God forbid, they will make pogroms against the Jews. The Rebbe Nishmos Eiden had damut by Anasifa, so the Rebbe Nishmos Eiden, the Rebbe Rashab, at that time, during a meeting, he spoke very sharp words. By ending reden, and after he finished speaking, hat gechalisht, he fainted. So lieb der Scharfkeit von seiner Rede, because he spoke so sharp, and also the words of protest gegen the Soreh HaMelucha, against the officers of the government, so lieb sehr dron mit pogromen, for their threatening with the pogroms. But when in Damot eingesetzt the Meiser Beisir, but they said put him into incarcerated home arrest. Then men had them Rebbe Nishmosei Nishmeter Bafrei, but then eventually when they freed him, is einer from the Rabbonim rein zum Rebbe Nishmosei. One of the Rabbonim entered to the Rebbe. But gesehen, as the Rebbe Nishmosei sitzt und weint, he said he was sitting and he was crying. hat gesagt zum Rebbe Nishmas Eden, he said to the Rebbe Nishmas Eden, Lubavitcher Rebbe, was weint ihr? Why are you crying? Man doch getan, alles was man hat gekannt. We did everything that we were able to. But the Rebbe Nishmas answered, the Rebbe Nishmas Eden answered, the Rebbe Nishmas answered, aber der Inyan hat sich nicht abgetan, but we haven't accomplished this matter. So he's crying because he was like the owner of the business, needs the things to happen. Test al derech ze is given the avodah from Bal HaGeula. Similarly, was the work of the Bal HaGeula. Zayendik durchgenommen mit Rotzen v'kavona ha'elyonim. Being that he was totally absorbed and totally overtaken with the desire and the supreme intent to meifit zayin Torah mitzvahs, to spread Torah mitzvahs. Umachon from Welt Adirelo Yisborech, to make from this world a dwelling place for him, blessed. Is b'shazan aveda bezel tzuk abgestalt. So when his work in this was stopped, durch sein Sitzen in Meiser, by sitting in incarceration, und der Hemshech ha'aveda is gestanden b'sakoner l'lachmon l'slan, and the continuous work was standing in danger, God forbid. But this caused them lots of pain, lots of yisurim. Nochmal. Furthermore, the Rebbe realized that the power that he has to accomplish is something unique which he needs to do. Just like by Moshe Rabbeinu, even though Moshe Rabbeinu was the humblest of all people, but yet we know that he recognized that he had that special ability. The Rebbe knew that while he was incarcerated, that special ability that he had is now being threatened because he's incarcerated. And that's what caused him tremendous pain. More than that. And by introduction, it's known the meaning of the verse. Man, Moshe was most humblest of any human being on the face of the earth. As das meint nicht, this does not mean as Moshe hat nicht gewusst seine Meiles, that he did not know his greatness. Was zu dem Zei, because of his greatness, he knew he's Kibbel Torah mit Sinai. He is the one that received the Torah from Sinai, Gal Yisrael mit Sinai. He redeemed the Jews from Egypt. But Adrab doesn't mean that that humility, that he didn't recognize his greatness. On the contrary, from them Gufa, his humility came from this itself. That he knew about his great powers. But that led him to believe that if somebody else had such powers, would have been able to accomplish a lot more before becoming in many places. He says, look at all this talent that I have. If somebody else had this talent, it would have accomplished a lot more. So it was the recognition of his talent that made him humble. Because he said somebody else would have this talent, would be greater than him. Al-Derech said the Rebbe, similar by the Rebbe. He certainly valued his strength. It's necessary to know your strength so that you can fully utilize them. He also knew as the Atzloch der Avodah from Arbotzus HaTorah, that the success in the work of spreading Torah and strengthening Chizuk HaYadus and strengthening Yiddishkeit had gefordert, demanded, those durchgeführt werden dafke durch den Rebbe, that this needs to be accomplished specifically through the Rebbe. As anders wird nicht sein, someone else will not be able to accomplish, to bring through, fulfill this mission. Is doch move on a viful der Meiser, so then it's understood how much this incarceration hat ihm gegeben Zarvag mas nefesh, that caused the pain and heartache. Similar to like you find by Moshe Rabbeinu. As noch the Eibishter hat Geuser given. After the Eibishter decreed, Loi taviu es hakol hazeh la'oretz asher nasati lehem. You won't bring the community to the land that I gave them. So Hashem says, you're not going to bring them in. Should have said, okay, fine. Send it to somebody else. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu insist? Hat sich mit Steine given. He was in pain. And he did a lot of davening. He was trying to accomplish it from Hashem as soll reinbringen die Eden Eretz Yisrael. He should be able to bring the Eden into Eretz Yisrael. Bis as beruftem as on this Moshe Rabbeinu's behavior of insisting like that, Rashi brings down, Hatalmid Kama Sarman, look what a persistent student it is, that he doesn't stop. He insists. What's his movement? So, understood. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu insist? As I kabona thereby, that his intention here is not given to live sein eigener Teilus. That wasn't for his own benefit. Why did he desire to go into Eretz Yisrael? Is given it was like a faithful servant to Mamala sein, to fulfill Umashlim sein them Odin's to fulfill and to complete the master's Hashem's shlichus was his given l'tevos of Shel Yisrael. It was for the Yid's benefit. Moshe Rabbeinu knew that if he brought them into Eretz Yisrael, this would be best for the Yidden. That would be accomplishing the full shlichus. Moshe Rabbeinu had gewusst. Moshe Rabbeinu knew ados was la'achar zman. The fact that after time, that sein der Churban Habayis is going to be the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Und die Yidden werden wieder darfen gehen in Golus. And the Yidden will have to go in Golus again in Chulu. That sein verbunden, that is associated, that mitvos Yeshua wird reinbringen die in Eretz Yisrael, is the fact that Yeshua brings them to Eretz Yisrael. So Moshe Rabbeinu was trying with everything he can that he should bring them in. And the far hat so viel mispalo given of sein Knisa Loretz. That's why he davened so much to enter the land. When Moshe will give the machnish von Eden Eretz Yisrael, had Moshe been the one to bring the Eden Eretz Yisrael, they would have had an eternal existence in the land, and therefore he insisted that Beis Hamikdash wollte nicht chorev geworden, Beis Hamikdash would not be destroyed. There would not be any more enslavement of the government. So that is what he was fighting for, not for himself, for the Yidden. That was his shalichus. As is aber noch als nicht move on. It's still not understood. Not understood why the Rebbe, even though he was in pain because he couldn't do the work and he was the only one that can do it. But if that's what the Eibishter did, it has to be that there is a purpose, that there's going to be better from that. That itself is part of the Eibishter's plan. So why is there a reason to be upset and have pain and discomfort and Yisurim from the fact? Yud. As is aber noch als nicht moving. It's still not understood. Since everything is by supervision and the direction of the Creator of Hashem, und der Tachlis hakavone von dem Ebersten, and the ultimate intent of Hashem, as durch harbotzus ha-Torah v'chizuk ha-Yadus, that through spreading Torah and strengthening Yiddishkeit, what the Friedrich Rebbe did, Zon is Gala Verna Lukus Ba'ilom, this should bring about the revelation of godliness into the world. That's what the Eberster wants. That's the ultimate kavanah. Bis as Welt soll werden adire lo yisbarach, to the extent that the world should become a dwelling place for him, blessed for Hashem, that gewiss ausgeführt werden. So that is for sure going to be accomplished. Hashem's intent, what Hashem wants to take place, is going to happen, regardless. Is doch der fun gufa muchach. So that alone is evident, since the Eibishter puts him in a situation, the Rebbe, that he cannot at that point. As euch der inyan hamaiser v'chulu, that also this concept of incarceration, etc., is nicht bichdei da avodah zol chas v'sholem abgeschwacht werden. That's not in order so the service should, God forbid, be weakened, but verkehrt, but just the opposite. Durch them, through this, this should add an advantage in spreading Yiddishkeit, etc. This actually materialized in actuality. What happened as noch der Gula von der Rebbe, that after the redemption of the Rebbe is noch mehr verstärkt geworden der Arbeit von Chizuk Hayadus. It further strengthened the work of strengthening Yiddishkeit. Bis halt das hat der Vier, to the extent that this led to the Yitzia von Rebbe Medina Hahi, that the Rebbe was left that country. But das hat der Meglech, that allowed as an Arbeit in Afotzas HaTorah v'Chizuk Hayadus, that his work in spreading Torah and strengthening Yiddishkeit is geworden viel mehr verstärkt und verbreitet. It became much stronger and became much more wider, bis to the Hafotza, the whole Katzvei table, that it spreads in all edges, all corners of the world. And this is similar, Balderich Vidos is given, but the Kenisa, that it's Yisrael, as similar to what took place when they entered Eretz Yisrael. As Choj, the Knisel is Lepoil given nid durch Moshe. Although entering in Eretz Yisrael, in practically speaking, in actuality, did not need durch Moshe, nor durch Yeshua, but rather Yeshua, und der Pharao gekannt sein und given. That's why it was able to be, and it took place the Churban Begolus. The destruction and the exile took place because Moshe didn't take them in and Yeshua took them in. Is thus over soy, but at the end of the day, given the Tevasim Shel Yisrael, this was for the benefit of the Yid. Thus at Ovgeton, this accomplished as alle Giluyim sollen nimshach werden durch der Avodah von Yid. This accomplished that all revelations should come about, to be extended through the service of Yid. And as a result, since the Yid bring it about, as the Giluyim, the Osid Lovei, that the revelations of the future to come, Zayin in a feel hecher and oifnar in a much higher way. So, the end of the day, we know that everything that the Eibishter's Kavan is going to take place. And this is just sort of a bump in the road, and what the Rebbe was experiencing is only in the Ratzon of Hashem, and it wasn't something which was really a true distraction. So Hein Farvosol does Goyim Zain Tzar Yusurim. So why should this cause the lack of the ability to do the work cause pain and Yusurim when this Eibishter is doing this? So it's not something, and it must be for a better cause. So we can say the explanation. There's one thing what's going to happen in the future, but at the time of the incarceration itself, is given a matzah von Helam behester der Avodah von Afotzas HaTorah. There was a situation that it was a block and an obstacle if the Avodah von Afotzas HaTorah on the service of spreading Torah was nicht gekannt durchgeführt werden. It was not able to be accomplished even at the level as it was before the incarceration. It was totally stuck. It was incarcerated. That alone, just the present situation, is something which is painful and hurts. Nicht nur mitzad der Maimed und Matzav von der Yiddische Neshama der Lamata. It's not only painful because of the standing of the Jewish soul below, but this is also, so to speak, a pain above for Hashem. For the situation that there is the opposite, there's no revelation of godliness. So while this is Hashem's intent and it's for a purpose and it's going to be greater, but at that point, when there is the Helem, it's a situation of Tsar even above. So Saifa the Neshama below and Sai Kaviyachal Lamayla. When Al Derech this is Yidu and the Inyan at Tzimtzum, similarly, what is known, the idea of the Tzimtzum, was the Rebbe is Mavayir in Ayud Beis Tamuz Dika Maimer, which the Rebbe explains in a Maimer that he gave on Yud Beis Tamuz, as Agam as the Kabone for the Tzimtzum is Bishvil Hagilu Shel Achro. Although the intent of that restriction of the Tzimtzum is because of the revelation that follows, Unochmer, and it's not only for the betterment or the Gilu that follows, but more, Kavonas HaGilui Gufa is the ganze Sibay for Tzimtzum. The only reason, not only after the Tzimtzum, there will be a Gilu later on, but the entire intent of the revelation, the intent for the revelation is the reason why we have a Tzimtzum. The Tzimtzum is because of the Gilui. Is over Guf, the Rebbe writes, the Guf etzem tzimtzum or hepecharotzen. The Tzimtzum, the restriction of self, is against the will. That's not the will, is to be Gilui. But the Rotzin ha'elyon is a Zolzain Gilui Oir, because the supreme will is that it should be a revelation of light. Okay, so that explains why the Rebbe was in pain, because notwithstanding that it may lead to a greater purpose, but at the time when there is the tzimtzum, at the time when there is the meiser, the time when there is incarceration, and you can't even do the spreading Yiddishkeit as before, it's something which is painful. Now the Rebbe is going to explain why the Hashgacha Pratis has to do and gave the Rebbe the necessary koyach to overcome these pain. Yudalef, Apikol Hanal Betmen Farstein, based on all the above, will understand the Shaykhis for Shitas Abal Shem Tov in Hashgacha Pratis, the connection of the Baal Shem Tov's view in divine providence, that we're saying that Hashgacha Pratis is on all and all Daimim Tzemeach Chai, and this is Oich of Daimim Tzemeach Chai, that it's also on the inanimate, the growing and living, Unof Yeder Prat Yeder Min, and also in every detail of every species, Unof Protein Yonov, in the specific matters of that Daimim Tzemeach Chai. So them Inyan, so now we'll understand how this is associated to the idea of Durchtrogen, to be able to carry through, to tolerate the pain of Velotzis min ha'maisa, Durchtrogen Lisbel the Yisurim Velotzis min ha'maisa. The Shloimar can say, as the Kavona Bazeh, the intent over here is neat when we talk about the Baal Shem Tov, that there is Hashgacha Pratis of Demer Tzmeir Chai, is neat in the Etzim Inyan. It's not in the idea itself of the Hashgacha Pratis is Oich of Demer Tzmeir Chai, that divine providence applies also to Daimim Tzmeir Chai. Nor der Chidush was kumt arois b'shitas of Baal Shem Tov, but the novelty which comes out of the view of the Baal Shem Tov, as is Faran Hashgacha Pratis of Daimim Tzmeir Chai, that there is the Hashgacha Pratis, Benegeya the Hashgacha Pratis ala Odom, as it relates to the Hashgacha Pratis on the person, the Hashgacha Pratis on Demer Tzmeir Chai, as associated to the Hashgacha Pratis of the person. The Rebbe is mevayer in a Yud Beis Tamuz Dikan Maimer. The Rebbe explains in a Yud Beis Tamuz Dikan Maimer as the inyan from Hashgocha Protis was der Baal Shem Tov is mevayer, that the idea of this specific individual supervision that the Baal Shem Tov explains meant what it means, not only as Yedder Tnua Protis from Yedder Nivra, that every detailed movement of every creation is Bashgacha Protis comes with specific supervision from Baidi Yisborach, from the Blessed Creator, no nochmer, more than that. As the Tenua Protis from the Nivra Protis, that specific movement of that specific creation, Yesh lo yachas klolis kavonas abriya. It has a general relationship to the general intent of creation. Gam tnua achas shel desha protikonik. That also one movement of one specific grass, mastima kavona hel yoina b'inyan habriya, that fulfills and completes the supreme intent in creation. Was der Fund kommt daraus an Oiftu, that brings out, tells us also an accomplishment, Oich in Inyan Hashgocha La'odam, also on the idea of supervision on the person. Oich ledas bale hashita, also according to the view, to those who go by the view, as Hashgocha Protis is blois of min hamedaber, that divine providence is just on the type, the human being, the medaber, un of daimem tzemeach chai, and on the other three categories, the inanimate, growing, and living, is faran blois a hashgocha klolis. There is just a general supervision, as he calls it hashgocha minis, a supervision for the entire type, for the species, but lo ish is not individual within the species, each individual within that species. In their view, is does davke by zelche inyonim, so that only applies in those matter was eine nor negeya de mini hadoimim tzmer chaim atzmon, that only touches and is connected to these species or to these kinds of the doimim tzemei chai themselves. If it relates just to them, then there is only this general supervision and not this specific. Aber in fall, but in a situation, in a case, when from a dover proti from doimim tzemei chai, when from a specific detail of the doimim tzemei chai, Yagia Eze Inyan El Hashgochas Odom, that will reach something of it to the supervision of people. Halten Oich Zei, even they would agree, they also will hold, as demult is do a Hashgocha Oich Oif them prat, and then there is also a supervision of the detail, because that detail is associated and it's connected to the supervision of the person. Nor l'daitom, according to their view, lo yigzer Hashem yisborech al elu hadogim sheyamusu ayichu. The blessed Hashem does not decree these fish should die, these fish should live. Aval gozar al ha'odam hazeh in yoneu parnososei. But rather, Hashem decrees, supervises and decrees on this person, his matters, his livelihood. So similar to this, there is the supervision to the human being in an animal that he owns, that belongs to him. Kigoin im yashmin shoyroi, should his ox be fat, become fat. In Tishbar Kadei, should his jug break. So the jug and the animal, as it relates to the person, is under general supervision even those who believe that it does not apply to the world of animals or the tzemech and the doimim. Lloyd Zeyer Shita Kontuis, according to their view, it turns out, as the Inyan fun Hashgocha Protis is Davke al Ha'adam, that the idea of divine supervision, specifically supervision only on the human being, Bibaldas Ed is that Tachlis Kol Habria, since he is the goal, the purpose of all of creation. Bishvil Yisrael Shenikru Reishis. So he's not talking about human beings, he's talking about the Yidden specifically, who are called the Reishis. Beis Reishis, first the beginning. B'meila is the Hashgocha Protis al Kol Inyon. So the divine specific supervision is not just on Adam, but anything related to the Adam, all matters of the Adam. Afilu vendosi zazach from Daimim Tzemeach Chai, even if it's an item of the Daimim Tzemeach Chai. So basically, when the Daimim Tzemeach Chai is associated to the person, then the divine specific supervision for the person extends to the Daimim Tzemeach Chai, which the person uses is connected to. Der Fun is verstandig. So from this we understand, it's understood, as es is faran achilik bahashitos, that there is a distinction, a difference in these views, oich in der hashgocha protis, in the Inyone ha'odom gufa, in the divine supervision as it relates within the matters of the person himself. In the Inyonim vos mizet in zei mailus ha'odom, in those aspects in which you can see the advantage of the human mitzad melchet and is tachlis abriya, because for which he becomes the purpose of creation. Because you see, we're talking about the greatness of the man, that he is the goal and the ultimate creation is the hashgacha of them b'oifun golu. So then that supervision is openly. Mashein kein azach was is beim odom blois an inyan tafel. But if it's a matter which by the person is only secondary, was mezet nit in ir milas odom, which you don't see in that aspect the advantage of the human, is the hashgocha protis nit in der zach mitzad atzmei. So then the divine supervision is not in the item itself, nor blois or viful the zah, the tafel zach is negayet's model, only to the extent in which this secondary item is important to the person. So there is no supervision in every aspect of the human being, but if the person has something secondary, the divine supervision there to the secondary aspects of the person is only to the extent as it relates to the person. As opposed to the view of the Baal Shem Tov, as yet der prat uprat from der bria, that on every detail and detail of the creation, afilu atnu achas shel desha prati, even one movement of one individual grass, hod mitzad atzmei ayachas kloli leklolos kavonas habriya, has on its own a general relationship to all of creation. Everything that happens, even with one grass, is not only that it's the Geya, it's important, but it's one big picture that it applies, and it's a relationship from all creation. And that completes the supreme intent in the creation. Is the chavade unavade. So how much more so? Azoi in the dvarim pratim v'zayner negei adam odom, details, matters which are connected to the person, as jeder prat to prat mitzad atzmei, that each individual detail on their own is mashlim the kavona, not just because it is not only those details that directly impact the person to his level, but any detail that is involved on their own, just the details themselves, is mashlim the kavona elyoina b'inyan habriya, that completes and that brings to its wholesomeness Hashem's intent, the supreme intent of creation. This is also the explanation in the above words of my father-in-law, the Rebbe. Der Öftu von Shitas Abal Shem Tov be'inyan ha'ashgocha protis, the novelty of the Baal Shem Tov's view in the idea of the divine supervision, specific supervision, but gebracht them der Herr. So that brought about that sense as vibal der Meiser v'Yisurov, seinen Bashgacha Proti, since the incarceration and the pains are by divine providence, is noisef of them. So in addition to the fact was der fun vetarishkumen, the hashlama, that from this will come out the completion from the kavona elyoina, from the supreme intent, through the addition and the strengthening that will future come in the spreading of Yiddishkeit, nor der geula, noch der geula from Meiser Canal, after the redemption from the incarceration canal, is oich der etzem hamaiser v'yisur of chulu, but the incarceration itself, the essence and its pain, is mashlim hakavona elyoina b'inyan habriya, that completes the supreme intent that of creation. So megala zayin elakuz ve'elam, that part is incarceration itself reveals godliness in the world. How so? What way? Shleimar say as that oiftu yisra notzich oizgidrik begolu in them, that this novelty and this advantage expressed itself openly in the fact was that etzem meiser had gebracht b'shas meiser, that the incarceration itself brought at the time noch mer his oirus, even more of an arousal, umisiras nefesh, and self-sacrifice zwischen Eden bechlal, amongst Yidden in general, and Chasidim Mekoshorim Bifrat, and the Chasidim and those who are tied to the Rebbe, especially during the incarceration, through the incarceration, zu starken sich in dem Rebbe's Arbeit von Achzokas Hayadus, to strengthen themselves in the work of the Rebbe and strengthening Yiddishkeit. Und noch mehr, and more than that, even more, das hat sich aufgetan euch in Meiser Gufa. This has actually been accomplished in the incarceration itself, in the imprisonment, that etzem shtel from the Rebbe, the fact, the essence of that approach of the Rebbe, with that toikef otzu, with a tremendous force in Zayin Hagedor, there he conducted himself with full force as a result for the Oivim Menagdim to Kedusha, that he will, for those enemies and opponents to Kedusha, Klau nit nispolven, that all not be affected. Nochmer, more, not only will they not affect him, he should not even consider them to be any entity. He looked at them as if they were like nothing, zero, totally nothing. That's the way he conducted himself all of the time in imprisonment. He disregarded them. He didn't give them any credence, any force, ignored them. That force came out in the incarceration. Dosot Megalgiven in Meiser Kufa. That revealed within the incarceration itself, as Ein Milvade, there is nobody besides Hashem. Dosot Gepoil, the Bittul Zeh, this impacted that subjugation, that nullification of them. Azeya Lein Hob Gemust, Afrain Rebbe, they themselves were forced to free the Rebbe. The Geret Merer Mo Barucha has spoken many times of that. Yud Gimel. Says the Chayomim Ha'ele, Niskorim V'Nasim, these days as they're remembered and then they're accomplished, they're done. Unbosa Reisha Gufa Ozel, the body follows the head. So, meaning what takes place with the head, with the Rebbe, we follow as the body that follows the head, as the Anhoga from the Rebbe. This conduct of the Rebbe that he related is a hayirah, that is a lesson, and it gives the strength in the Avodah from Yeder in the service of every Yid. The koil lereish darfman wissen, first and foremost, one needs to know, as kein shum zach tornich sternen ophalten, nothing should disturb and hold back from durchführen the shlichas from the Rebbe in Arbotzes HaTorah v'chizuk hayadus. Nothing can disturb or hold back from accomplishing the mission of the Rebbe in spreading Torah and strengthening Yiddishkeit. Ubefrat, especially as his melech has to leave them, that it's possible that because of this was the arbet 40 nidur b'tzrizus adrusha, that we're not accomplishing it with the necessary alacrity, the quickness for haltmen for rega bis Mashiach. We are delaying, even for an instant, the coming of the righteous Mashiach. Ushchinta begolusu, the Shchinta is in exile. And on the other hand, we must know, as a no matter which condition, situation a Yid finds himself, even when he does not see any possibility, God forbid, as there's Lokenen Tonin Afotzes Hayadus Vamayonis, that he should be able to do in spreading Yiddishkeit and the wellspring. Tormen sich nit miyayish sein chas v'shol. We're not allowed to give up, God forbid. And dar gedenken, we need to know, have to remember, as oich dos is b'ashgacha protis. This too is by divine specific supervision. B'shas is do der yagaita. When there will be the effort, you put in the effort, that will bring about also that you will find. As mevet euch in dem maime du matzev gefinnen an ihnen, that also in this standing the situation, you'll find that aspect was vet oifton gilu elikus, that will accomplish the revelation of godliness of the Goli Mamish and actually open. As al yidei zeh, through this, let men soif poil zayin. At the end, we will accomplish as the avodas of oich zayin, the matzah from his galus, that the service should be in a situation of open revealed. As we bring in bizrizus, that will bring hastily bias Mashiach tzidkenu, the coming of a righteous Mashiach, and the glory of Hashem will be revealed. V'rou kol basar yachdav, and all flesh will see together. Kipi Hashem diber, that it's Hashem's mouth that has spoken. This is Mesichas Yud Gimel Tamuz Tofshin Yud Aleph.